On this episode of Curve Ahead, I'm joined by Jeff Borello, the co-founder of Andromeda Technology Solutions, an IT managed service provider that's been thriving for over 30 years in the Chicagoland area. Jeff shares his incredible story on how three co-founders built a business from working nights and weekends into a 37-person, 24-hour operation without ever losing focus on customer service. In this episode, we talk about the challenges and hard-earned lessons of growing through acquisition and knowing when to pivot back to your core offering. We also covered why focusing on simplicity is critical for sustainable growth, even when customers ask for more than you're built to do. If you're in the thick of building a service-based business or wonder when to say no, this episode is packed with insights from someone who's been doing it for decades. Hey, Jeff, welcome to the podcast. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Thanks for having me, Brian. So Jeff Borello, Andromeda Technology Solutions. We are an IT managed service provider out of the Chicagoland area.
What led you to, tell me about your background that led you to start Andromeda?
So we've been at this for over 30 years now. So it's a long time back, but myself and my two co-founders all worked at the same company right down the street from here. I'm like literally 5 minutes from where we worked. We all worked really hard there, 70, 80 hours a week sometimes. Great place to work, but they struggled a lot. So one day, one of us walked in, and there's a big debate on who it was, and I'm the guy doing the podcast, so I always get to say it was me. Walked in and said, hey, if we're going to work this hard, we should do something for ourselves. And we were taking care of the IT network and the computers there at the time, and we said, well, let's go do that. And we started, this was back in the day when you didn't just take a bunch of money and everybody quit, right? So we did it part-time, nights, long nights, weekends, that kind of thing. And slowly, we built it up over the 30 years. There's like 37 people here now. We're almost 9 million in revenue. So, and the three co-founders are all still here day to day doing our part. So it's, we always talk about, there was some luck involved in the beginning, right? Getting that first client, kind of go, okay, maybe there's something here. So it's been a fun ride, I'll tell you that.
What's it like working with the same three people for more than 3 decades?
It's phenomenal, really. We always say it's, we're still here and we haven't killed each other. That's the running joke. It's first of all, it's rare enough for a company to be in business 30 years, but with the same three co-founders, right? Because normally there's just, we've had some battles and some tensions here and there, but because we have three very different personalities, it's really lended itself to just a tremendous partnership. I see a lot of other IT managed service providers where it's one guy and maybe as a 5-person team, but when he leaves, like they can't take a vacation, right? So having those people there to back you up. So even in the early days, we all had roles to fill and it was hard. If you take a vacation, you still have to take some phone calls, but just knowing that there was the right people back there that had your back, it was really a great thing.
Do you have complementary discipline, like complementary backgrounds, or do you guys kind of have some overlapping there?
They're pretty complementary. So at the company we worked at, 2 of us were software engineers. We wrote code, myself and one of my other partners, and then the other guy, he was more of a hardware guy. So like, for example, when we first started the company, we'd do some network installations where we'd have to run cable. He knew everything about running cable. And this is back when you had to run coax cable and you had to terminate it yourself. It was a whole different ballgame. So yeah. But the core piece that really tied us all together was our love for the customer, right? We were always very customer service focused. The company we came out of was very customer service focused. So we just always had this, and still 30 years later, that is still what drives us, is making sure the customers are taken care of, making sure we're helping them.
Is there a story behind the name or why you chose Andromeda as the name of the business?
There is. It's just not a very good story. So when I was in high school, took on a few side projects writing code. And at the time, my older brother had turned me on to Michael Crichton's first book, The Andromeda Strain. I knew it more from the movie, but I'd also read the book. So when I needed to make a company, it was like, oh, it started with an A, so it had that going. It sounded kind of techie, right? So it originally started as Andromeda Computing Systems. And then over time, we deviated to Andromeda Technology Solutions. But when we started the company, we all sat down. I said, listen, guys, I already have this company. I have a checking account already. It already exists. Do we want to use that? And nobody could come up with anything better. So it stuck.
Great. I mean, sometimes that's all it takes, right? Is, well, I've already got the entity set up. I've got the checking account. It's all above board. Let's just use that. And if there's not a better option, it sticks.
Out of the 100 things we had to do on day one, it was, 5 less things to do. So, let's go.
Love that. So you had mentioned kind of the evolution of the name Andromeda and how it's changed over the history of the organization. Tell me how the actual organization has evolved over the last 30 years.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that's part of the reason we changed the name. So, when we started out, we were doing computers and networks, right? And it was a very different business back then. But over time, at some point, we knew a guy, and we'd always get asked, people say, hey, can you take care of our telephone systems? And it was three of us, right? We'd look around and go, yeah, we have experience with that, but nobody wanted to take on more work. And then a guy we knew came along and he was leaving what he was doing. He said, hey, I used to sell telephone systems. You guys looking to do this? And I install them. And so we said, sure. So we started doing telephone system. And then over the time that business grew. So at some point we said, okay, we got to get the computing out of the name, and it became more of a technology evolution. But then over the 30 years, we kind of did, and at some point we acquired a company that installed, and that was all they did was business telephone systems for years, right? It was a husband and wife ran it, and they were looking to retire. And then that grew. And then over time, we said, what else could we do? Right. And we started doing physical security with security cameras and burglar alarms. And we bought a company that did that. And then at some point we had an opportunity to buy a website development company, and we did that. So at some point we had literally those four different businesses, and they were very different businesses. There were some synergies across them, and we always thought there'd be a lot more synergies, but it turned out there was probably less of that. And it just really pulled our focus away. So now over the last 3 or 4 years, we've sold all those off, spun them out, and we're back to being right where we started, an IT company that focuses on IT.
What's that process like, growing through acquisition and then realizing that maybe it wasn't the best long-term play for the organization, and then having to either sell it off or part ways with it?
Yeah, we had some struggles with that because obviously we had some, we had some key people. We had, and a couple of those we had to let some people go, which we hate to do. The very last one we did, we actually sold it to one of our technicians, right? So our technician took it over, and he's off running his own business now, which we thought was great. But yeah, there's a little bit of that. And they were all good businesses, right? But it was really hard for, we have a 5-person leadership team to go off for a quarterly planning meeting. It's hard enough to plan for one business, let alone 2 or 3 or 4. And there just wasn't enough bandwidth to do that. So yeah, is it a little bit of like, you feel like you went through this whole thing, you acquired it, you spent some money, you built it up. We had put some of the technology in with customers that were still going to be here. So, unwinding that was not fun. In a lot of cases, we had to get in front of some really good customers and say, yeah, we brought this company on. We've now taken it on for you, and now it's not, right? So we were very intentional and very careful about how we did that, and made sure wherever the business went, it was with someone that was going to still take care of the customers.
Do you think that part of the reason the acquisitions happened is, you had mentioned that you are super focused on customer service, that you had these customer requests and you found an avenue to be able to fulfill it, but ultimately may have not been best for like the long-term vision and growth of the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was, because at some level it all is technology, right? And it all plays together at various pieces, right? Telephone systems eventually became part of the network, and almost all the security cameras were part of the network. So there was the commonality that seemed like it made sense. And it did for the customer for sure, right? Well, that was always one of our things. Listen, the less vendors you have to call as a customer, the better your life is, right? And they knew we'd take good care of them. So that was absolutely the impetus behind why we did it. It was then when you came to the planning phase and trying to figure out, even just trying to keep the finances straight, right? All of a sudden you got guys with trucks and ladders, and work comp is different over there. So there was a lot of pieces that were different. And it just took up a lot of time and added a lot of complexity to the business that's already pretty complex.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And as a younger organization, talking about myself, like, you want to be, as a service-based business, you want to say yes to your customers as much as you can. You also, especially in the phase where you're starting to grow, like when you're starting to acquire more and more customers, it's okay, can I do this and still stay within the confines and scope of my overall organization without stepping over and making a pivotal mistake in the long run? So I battle those challenges on a regular basis, which is kind of like why I asked down that rabbit.
Yeah, for sure. When you're in that startup or early phase, it's, all the business we can get our hands on, right? Good, bad, ugly, we don't care. We're just taking anything we can get. And then as you get, more mature, more scaled, now all of a sudden it's like, wow, we're trying to deliver, 20 different versions of the same thing, and it gets really hard. And then, it's one thing when you're small and it's one person. Like, I'm the guy that sold it. I quoted it. I installed it. I have to support it, right? I know all that. Now you start getting more people and more layers, and all of a sudden, 3 people down have no idea what it's like. Well, this is different than the last one, and it gets really, really chaotic for everybody down the line, and it's really just not a sustainable way to grow. And in the end, everybody suffers, right? Our team suffers, the efficiency suffers, and ultimately the clients eventually suffer because you're not delivering the service as good as you could if you were focused on something. So yeah.
Yeah. Let's go back in time for you. What was like that pivotal moment early on when you realized this is going to work for us? This is going to be something bigger.
It's awesome. When I was on a podcast last week, they asked the exact same question. I really think it was that very first business customer that came to us. So our very first customer was, we're still not a very great marketing firm. Our first marketing was standing out in front of Best Buy and handing out flyers to Best Buy people where they're walking in. And we picked up like a home user out of that. But I think that first, we did some marketing. We sent some mailings to the local chamber, and we got a phone call from that, and then being able to go in there and sell. So my partner and I went in. We were like, this was before the internet, right? We had trouble finding any information on the company. It was like, well, it looked like a law firm. Like, do we wear ties? Do we not wear ties? Do we wear suit? Like, we had no idea what we were doing. So getting that first deal closed, where you said, okay, maybe we do know what we're doing here, right? Because we didn't know squat in the beginning. We didn't have a clue. So I think getting that first one or two where you go, okay, and that takes a little bit of luck, because you go 6 months or a year without doing that, and the whole thing probably ends up just, you go, okay, this isn't going to work, and you lose interest. So it doesn't take much of that spark of, ooh, we got one. Now, if you get one, we can get two. And if you get two, you're right. And then you just get that momentum going, and then you get the surge of energy. So I think that was really probably that very first customer, I think. That was a really long-winded answer to that question.
No, I totally get it, right? Like finding those early customers and then like riding that high of landing them and then starting to deliver for them, but also at the same time trying to keep that flywheel going to find the next one and then the next one to grow the organization. So yeah, no, I'm in that phase right now where it's like, okay, I've got a couple of early customers, just trying to acquire more and continue that flywheel and make sure that I continue with the momentum to be able to grow the organization to where I want it to be.
Yeah. And you're just sitting in that very first meeting hoping they don't say, well, how many other customers do you have? Right? Because the answer is zero.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And really, and the best part of that story is that, so that very first customer we signed, so they were a customer for a long time. They got acquired and left us, and now they came back. So they're still here with us, which is just we love that story.
Yeah. That is a great story. I guess it goes back to show that you guys do deliver customer service well, that regardless of who owns the organization, that you're still providing the service in a way that they need it and felt comfortable with coming back to you even after leaving.
Yeah, which is, that's what, you never burn bridges, right? Somebody leaves, we try to do our best to exit people out cleanly when they want to go. So sometimes they come back, and then there's some cases where some people have an ego and they won't come back. But it's, we always try to do what's right for us and for the customer. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't.
Sorry, just consulting my notes. Here's a good question. Has there been a piece of advice or leadership lesson that has stuck with you throughout your career?
So we were fortunate. When I mentioned the prior place we worked, we had a manager there who was just a phenomenal manager. Matter of fact, we're still in touch with him. He's retired. He lives in Florida, but we share our wins with him every now and then. But he really taught us that we were software engineers, and there's hardware engineers. It was a very engineering minded thing, but it was, hey, if you needed to take 2 hours to run to the doctor, you took 2 hours to run to the doctor, right? And he knew he was going to get the hours and the results out of you. So we've really tried to carry that into the organization with our team. It's a little harder as you get bigger, but he really taught us about the right way to treat people, right? Give them some autonomy. But he also was like, if you decided one 10-minute segment to screw off in a month, he would somehow show up at your door at that moment. It was just an amazing ability he had to just sniff out somebody doing something they shouldn't do. And then he'd come down on you like a ton of bricks, right? So it was that flexibility, the autonomy, and just, man, did he just teach us just all kinds of lessons just by living under him and having his management tutelage, I guess. We just absorbed so much from him, and I've taken so much into future. And we tell him that all the time. And it's a great feeling to know that how much we took from him.
That's pretty incredible to think that you worked with someone that long ago who was so impactful early on in your career that even after you've stepped out and started to do your own business, that you're continuing to share wins with them. That's a pretty incredible story.
Well, it's funny. So we just in October, we celebrated our 30th anniversary. So we had a party, we had the whole company, and we literally, I was writing up a little speech the day before, and I sort of told a similar story about Bill was his name. And I was like, I should have flown Bill up here for this. And I did, I was like, you think of it the night before, it's too late, but it would have been a great opportunity to have him come up and just celebrate him. So maybe at the 40th.
Yeah, 35.
35. Yeah, that's better.
Is there anything else that you wanted to cover about Andromeda that we haven't talked about quite yet?
If there's some younger companies out there, the lessons, right? It's there's a lot of, I don't want to call them quick buck artists, right? But there's this whole concept of, drop out of school, get a bunch of money, work for 2 years, sell the company for $1 billion. It's like, yeah, those are unicorns. They just, there's a reason they call them unicorns. If you want to start a business and you want to be successful, and whatever success means to you, it generally means hard work, and it means stay in the course, right? And you got to be prepared for some long nights, and you got to be prepared to wear a lot of hats. And it's not easy, and it's not for everybody. I think it's very rewarding. I love it. I still pop out of bed every day ready to go do my thing, right? But you got to love it, because it's going to be a grind. There's going to be times when, you got to go dip into your bank account to cover payroll or whatever it may be, right? There's going to be some struggles, and you got to have the grit to be able to weather those and be in for the long haul. And you got to love it. If you don't love it, it's going to chew you up and spit you out for sure.
I mean, there's definitely days where you don't necessarily love it, but like if I do some self-reflection over the past year, the skills level up that I've had just in 1 year, the things that I've learned, had to experience, forced me to think about and actually execute on, has been way more than the career that I had in like corporate America over 15 years.
Yeah. I mean, it's the drinking from the fire hose, right? It's, you got to figure it all out. You got to figure out how to market it, sell it, do it, deliver it. I mean, it's just, and that's part of what I love about it. People always ask me what I like. I love that every day is a different challenge. The world changes, the industry changes, new tools come out, right? AI shows up, there's a pandemic, right? All those things that, for me, it's the troubleshooting, figuring out the solution, and then seeing the solution work. There's nothing better. And doing it with people you love.
Yeah, I think that doing it with people you love makes it much easier to show up every day and show out every day, right?
Yeah.
I had a role early in my career that I worked with a group of 4 or 5 people that I always felt like we were in the trenches together. We suffered together. It not in a bad way. Like, we all loved what we did in the long term, but like being there with those people every day, day in and day out, made it so much easier to just get what we needed to do done.
No doubt. Yeah, 100%.
So you had mentioned something, and I think that it's in a lot of the podcasts that I've hosted, that there's been such a disruption over the last couple of years with the commercial availability of AI. How has that impacted you and Andromeda?
So we use it, but not a lot. Someday someone's going to come out and get mad at me for this, but I think the AI hype is so far in front of the AI reality. It's an amazing tool, don't get me wrong, but we use it a lot for generating content, for a lot of writing stuff. But it also, there's a lot of times now, if I'm having a problem with some software or something I can't figure out, I start with ChatGPT before I go to Google now. And a lot of times it gives you a great answer. Not always. So I absolutely think it's going to be a completely disruptive technology. I just saw a demo earlier today about an AI, a chat bot, that basically they feed it everything from your website, so it knows who you are. And it's amazing, just conversational and spitting out stuff about us like a human would. It was pretty amazing. So it's going to be revolutionary. And I think every business in the world needs to be at least looking at it. It's got to be on your radar. You at least got to be aware of it, and you got to start getting it built into your planning somewhere, right? Because I do think it's going to be that disruptive. But I think it's still pretty early, and I think there's some bad versions of it out there. So I think you got to be careful.
I think there's 2 questions, or one statement and one question with regards to what you had just mentioned. I agree. AI is it's here to stay. But right now, your output is solely dependent on your input. So knowing how to get what you need out of the system is the biggest complexity proponent right now that I'm seeing using any sort of platform. Like, I use quite a few of them just for different applications. I mean, ChatGPT is great. I love the ability to continue to train the model, especially on my business. I've gotten really into the new one is RAG, on being able to train it. Basically what you're talking about, a chatbot, training it on your website, your content. I do that a lot with ChatGPT, and do that quite a bit with Claude when I'm doing any sort of writing. And in Perplexity, when I need to do like a Google search type thing, I go there before I go to Google or ChatGPT. But you had mentioned that businesses now need to start considering using it. When do you think that every business needs to be on that train or not, or they're going to be left behind?
Man, that's a good question. I mean, it's the speed at which this has come out. I mean, it went from not hearing this thing to like usability. So, man, it's hard to imagine even like a year from now what it'll be doing. So, yeah, I think if they're not, I struggle a little bit with you at least got to be looking at it and thinking about it. You really probably today, if you're not have it in some aspect of your business, right? If that's marketing, say you're way, way behind probably, right? But I think it's, probably every company, you probably should put a steering committee together, a team that, every month they should be sitting down and saying, what should we be looking at next? And what tools should we be looking at? It is not a small undertaking. I think you're exactly right. It's like any tool, garbage in, garbage out. The better you learn how to use the tool, the better it will give you output. So I think there's absolutely, even at the base level of just learning that piece is a good start. But yeah, I think a year from now, 2 years from now, probably it's probably unrecognizable, right?
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, my wife works for a huge multinational retailer, and her company's biggest concern is like data privacy. And I think that that is going to, in the next year, that will be solved some way, shape, or form with a lot of these commercial models where you can wall off your data to prevent the model from using that to continue to train.
Yeah. That's one of the things. So obviously we're an IT shop, right? So a lot of our customers come along and we're a Microsoft shop. So they come around and say, hey, we want to fire up 5 Copilot licenses. So we've been very, very cautious with people because, we tell people, listen, unless you have your data structured and your security set up right, you give this to the receptionist and she start asking for people's salaries. And if they're out there, it'll find it, right? So we've been trying to really get our clients to really understand that this is not a tool to be deployed lightly, and you need to get your infrastructure set up right. And that's not easy either, right? Because there's 20, 30, 40 years of data out there that no one's organized, no one's looked at. Donnie in the shop's not going to find it, but the AI will. I think you talk about the data privacy and just the walling things off. It's all going to need to get figured out for sure.
So one of the things that I noticed about you and your organization is that you run a 24/7 team. Can you tell me some of the key elements in creating a successful 24/7 team without like burning everybody out?
Yeah, you outsource the 24/7 part. So yeah, right now we run our internal team from 7 a.m. till 6 p.m. at our service desk. Anything after that right now is outsourced. At some point, we'll get a critical mass of customers where it makes sense to bring it in house. We're just not there yet.
Or,
I'll have to wind out of sales on that question. Sorry.
No. I mean, that's kind of the direction that I thought it was going to go. So what I guess, when creating an outsourced team, what are some of the key elements to look for there?
Yeah. So it's really easy to find 24/7 outsourced if you are willing to do some things offshore, which we don't have a problem with, but some of our customers do. So we have some customers that are under some regulations that's just not feasible. So finding a US based 24/7 that is priced to not break the bank, now that's a little tough, right? So finding the right team that was a mesh with us, that's been a little challenging. So it's, we've vetted a few, we've tried a few, we've switched around a little bit. So, we tend to be very partnership oriented. So when we find a vendor, if they work, we'll stick with them for a long, long time. So it's finding that right match for what we need, I think is the biggest challenge.
I've worked with quite a few organizations that we have done kind of around like follow the sun approach, right?
Yeah.
So whatever team is on is during their working time, and they pass it on to the next team, right?
Yep.
So I understand from that perspective, and I also understand trying to find support that doesn't cost an arm and a leg, especially with like there's a lot of countries now that you can find people who are really great at delivering deliverables that are very specific to a type of deliverable, which kind of goes against the autonomy piece that we were talking about earlier. So you have to kind of balance to provide them the direction, provide them like the SOPs to allow them to perform their tasks, be successful in their roles without like having to spend all of your time managing those individuals or teams.
Yeah, for sure. And again, in IT, they're not cookie cutter problems a lot of times, right? You got to be able to get in, you got to troubleshoot, you got to have access to things, and it's a challenging problem in our world for sure. And the problem is unless you have a lot of clients, like most of the stuff, even places that run 23 shifts at a manufacturing plant, usually there's not a lot of activity at night, right? It's very expensive to have a team on staff for something that happens once every other week, right? So it's just a weird balancing model to try to find something that works across the board for everybody and is scalable.
So, Jeff, I appreciate your time today. So, at the end of each one of my podcasts, I give my guests 90 seconds to plug anything that they're passionate about. So, in your case, that could be Andromeda, that could be finding a mentor, that could be finding a good group of friends to start a business with. But without further ado, the next 90 seconds are yours.
Yeah, I think for the right mentality, if you're up for the challenge and you're willing to put in the time and the work, being a business owner, there's nothing like it. Is it stressful? Is there some weight that gets put on your shoulders? Are you the guy walking around carrying all the worries? And right, we have a business loan here, and what's the collateral? Our houses, right? I don't think people appreciate, what goes into that and the risk that can carry with that. When you show up home, you got to tell your wife that, yeah, I got to sign some paperwork that the bank, could take the house. But I think it's a very rewarding thing. I think it's an awesome endeavor. For me, love, our core purpose at the company, which a lot of that comes from me, is just helping people succeed, right? So if there's somebody out there that you're wondering about something, whether it's IT or starting a business or, what it's like to live in the Chicagoland area, I'm available to talk. I'd love to help people, and I'd love to do that. So, Brian, I really appreciate you having me on.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate your time today.